So I've been exploring my junk mail files, looking at these ask questions, and I found another one that I thought was interesting. Is Kevin Spacy done as an actor? As you probably know by now, there were many accusations levied against Kevin Spacy, and this is not personal commentary. I'm not saying anything aside from due process for everyone, but I want to see what people think. Is Kevin Spacy done? Is his career over? So hey there, so today we are returning to that wonderful world of Hollywood coverage, and I'm curious about questions like this because it tells you what people think out there about stars, and I definitely want your comments about this too. What do you think about Kevin Spacey's career? Can he return from all of the things that were in the press about him? Now, as far as this question goes, it indeed asks, is Kevin Spacey done as an actor? But it also asks, will Hollywood ever give work once more to producers, actors, or directors that have had past criminal wrongdoings unearthed? So we're going to focus on three answers representing yes, he can, no, he can't, and well, it depends. Now, depends is kind of a fascinating one because it assumes guilt. It says even though his latest case was dismissed, he needs to go on the offensive, he needs to admit his wrongdoings, and ask his victims to come forward and tell their stories. Quote, the answer is, it depends. Spacey needs to stay out of the public eye for a bit and let things blow over. If he wants to have a career again, he's going to have to do a few things. Number one, he needs to genuinely be sorry for his actions. Not just say the words, but actually show that he means it. Two, he needs to make amends. His latest case was dismissed, but he needs to go on the offensive. And by that, he needs to come out, admit his wrongdoings, and not just apologize, but ask his victims to come forward and tell their stories. He needs to be an advocate against his own behavior and do something to empower victims. Three, he needs to go through treatment. Apparently, alcohol was always involved when he assaulted people. He needs to get sober and no longer be, quote-unquote, that guy. They continue with number four. He needs to give it time. What he's done and been accused of doing is still fresh in people's minds. He needs to let his redemptive actions be his public persona for a while so that people can start to see that he's not just checking boxes, but is legitimately contrite. That takes time. 5, start small. He's moved on. He needs to get people used to seeing him on film again. Small parts that showcase his talent. He needs to not be the headliner for a while so that people can get used to seeing him on the screen again. I honestly don't know if he'd be willing to do all that is required for him to rehabilitate his career. It wouldn't be quick, nor would it be easy. As it is, he's rich, he's pretty much overcome all legal issues he's facing, and he can just sail off into the sunset. Now here's a legit question before we move on to our next answer, because I legitly don't get this. Why would you want to give somebody a redemption arc if you assumed guilt in this case? And that's a huge qualifier. If you assume guilt. See, we're not talking about substance abuse issues or stealing cars or kiting checks. We're talking about some of the worst behavior you can do to your fellow persons. If that is the case, you assume guilt, why would you ever want to see their face on the silver screen again? Now, for the next one, we're going to stick with that negative qualifier. We're going to say that, yes, the man is indeed done. Why? Well, number one, that harassment thing, it isn't going to go away. Even after Spacey will have hope that everyone has forgotten it, they won't. It's going to haunt him for the rest of his career. And that's true. He will carry that negative stigma with him, the ramifications of it, in my opinion, for the rest of his career. And again, that is not a guilt or innocence statement. That's just the reality of the situation. 2, he was never a big box office draw. If Kevin Spacey was a Robert Downey Jr. or a Tom Cruise, then he would have been hobbled, but still functional. However, his most successful period was nearly 2 decades ago, and he has moved into character roles by the time that House of Cards came around. He's now in a position where he doesn't have enough appeal to continue as a useful performer. So, he doesn't have enough draw on the big screen. He doesn't make enough money. therefore. And I wonder, do you agree with that? Do you think the small screen isn't enough to save you? That's an interesting thing, too. 3, he came out. As stated before, while American film audiences mouth tolerance, almost no actors are successful when they out themselves. Spacy coming out pretty much removed him from straight romantic lead roles, and there aren't enough roles left that he could feel which would be a good fit for him. Now, I'm not sure what roles this person is thinking of when it comes to Kevin Spacey, but the 2 big ones that immediately come to mind for me are The Usual Suspects and American Beauty. Neither one of those were conventional stories, and neither one of those really painted Spacey in a romantic leading role, but they did put him in a position of prominence on the screen where the oddity could play out. So I don't know if number 3 actually is that end-all that somebody's painting. 4, he came out number 2. Instead of his coming out being a quote-unquote natural response, it was forced and done in an effort to stymie allegations of impropriety against him. It wasn't viewed as being a brave move as much as it was a desperate one by a man who has been lying for decades. People hate those who aren't contrite or who can't act contrite, and Spacey has failed at both. Now, I think that, in association with 3, it actually makes a better answer. And number 5, he's too old. While he's only 59, Spacey has worked so much that it seems like he's much older. There aren't that many roles for guys his age, and his competition would consist of more established or popular actors without the harassment baggage. Unless Spacey produces his own projects, so there's something there, unless Andy employs himself and is successful doing so, he is finished in Hollywood. Now, the third answer that I'm going to include in here is about innocence until proven guilty. I thought about including this one here, but when they start talking about the old Abrahamic efforts by religionists to do X, Y, and Z, yeah, it felt a little bit too off its medication, so we're going to go back to this statement because it's talking about innocent until proven guilty, and it's assuming, since he was not found guilty, that he's going to still have a career. So innocent until proven guilty. This is not merely a quote. This is the basis of our justice system. This is what makes our justice system fair. In this particular case, all the people who decided to accuse Kevin Spacey and thus ruined his reputation and all of his chances of employment subsequently refused to testify in court, but they still maintain that he is guilty. It's like X shouting on social media that Y is guilty of committing a crime against him, which in turn ruins Y's reputation, gets him fired from a job. And then when a case is brought against Y, X refuses to testify in court, forcing the prosecutor to drop his case. But X still maintains Y is guilty. All the chances of proving Y's innocence are taken away from him or her, aka not being able to meet your accuser. In my opinion, it continues, all his accusers should be forced to apologize. They should be made an example of, because otherwise it had become very easy anyway to throw accusations at people and then deprive them of any chance of proving their innocence. Now, you have other questions out there too, asking whether or not he'll try to make movies again, and you get answers like this. I believe he will try for a while at least. He had a movie come out a little while ago, and even though he only made a brief appearance in it, his own tainted reputation tanked the movie, monumentally so. If memory serves me right, it only grossed $126 opening week, all from what was essentially a cameo. Like I said, I believe he will try at least until he becomes box office poison and is forced unceremoniously into retirement and eventually fades into obscurity or infamy, maybe both. Now, there are a lot of other fascinating questions about Kevin Spacey here, too. Like, what is Kevin Spacey like in real life? Is there any real evidence against Kevin Spacey? Is his career over? Will Kevin Spacey ever make movies again? And my personal favorite, after all that's been said about Kevin Spacey, should I feel bad for watching his films and still enjoying them? Now, I'm not saying anything about guilt or innocence in going through this, too. I simply want other people's opinions on what's going on. So, leave me your opinion on this. Will Hollywood ever give him another shot? And will the public as well? Will they ever invite him back? Or is this stuff basically, is this endgame? Let me know what you think. As always, too, I appreciate you showing up. I appreciate you checking this out. Let me know if you like the question things, too. I kind of like this format, going through things and getting a little bit of discussion started. Also, check out the links in the description if you want to help the channel out. There's a few out there. But like I said, as always, appreciate you showing up. You make these things work. Without you, it does not work at all. So thank you, and we'll see you soon.